The first thing I felt was pain, sharp, relentless, like a vice squeezing my chest. Then came the darkness, thick and suffocating, pulling me under. I remembered collapsing in the kitchen, the cold tile against my cheek, John's distant voice calling my name as everything faded. I remembered dying. At 55, worn down by decades of sacrifice, betrayed by the man I'd loved for 35 years and the daughter I'd carried for 10 months. I died alone, exhausted from caring for his paralyzed first love, while they planned their new life together the moment I was gone. Then, impossibly, I opened my eyes. The hospital room was sterile, bright, the monitors beeping steadily. My hand flew to my chest, no pain now, just a faint ache. I was alive. Not just alive, younger, stronger, back on the exact day everything began to unravel in my previous life. The day John insisted on bringing Sophia home after her accident. I knew what was coming, the arguments, the guilt trips, the slow erosion of my dignity until I was nothing but a servant in my own home. 7 days from now, I would collapse and die from heart failure brought on by stress and neglect. They would marry a week later. But this time, I knew. John stood by the bedside, his handsome face etched with worry and something else, anticipation. He was still the successful New York businessman everyone admired, tailored suits, charming smile, the kind of man neighbors called a saint. They never saw the emotional distance, the way he treated our home like a hotel, the way he'd always put his guilt over Sophia above everything else. "Alex," he said softly, taking my hand. "You fainted. The doctor said it was stress. You've been fighting me so hard about Sophia coming home." I stared at him, memorizing every line of his face. In my last life, I'd screamed, cried, begged him not to destroy our family. I'd lost. This time, I felt something cold and steady settle in my chest. "Bring her home," I said calmly. He blinked, stunned. "What?" "You heard me. Bring Sophia here. She needs care, and you feel responsible. I won't stand in your way." His mouth opened, then closed. He looked like he'd been slapped, or granted a wish he'd never truly believed would come true. "Alex, are you serious? After everything you said yesterday?" I pulled my hand away gently and reached for my purse on the side table. Inside was my insurance card. Dead serious. But first, I need a full checkup. I'm not taking any chances with my health. He stared as I swung my legs over the side of the bed, surprisingly steady. 30 minutes earlier, in this same timeline, I'd been hysterical, refusing to let Sophia cross our threshold. Now I was agreeing without a fight. He couldn't hide the flicker of triumph in his eyes, quickly masked by concern. On the drive to the diagnostic center, he kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror. I saw his hands, the way he rubbed his palms together when he was secretly elated. I'd been married to him long enough to read every tell. 35 years of paying attention to the smallest details while he barely noticed I existed. At the hospital, he tried to steer me toward the inpatient ward. "Sophia's this way. We should pick her up together, make her feel welcome." I laughed, a short, sharp sound that made him flinch. "No, John, you go get your precious Sophia. I'm here for me." I walked away without looking back, leaving him standing in the corridor looking lost. The tests took all-day blood work. EKG, stress test, scans. The doctor, a kind older man with wire-rimmed glasses, reviewed the results with me late that evening. "Mrs. Harper, you're remarkably healthy for your age. Slightly elevated blood pressure, nothing more. You need rest, less stress. Whatever's been weighing on you, try to let it go." I nodded, exhaling a breath I felt I'd been holding for decades. No hidden tumors, no ticking time bomb in my arteries. The death sentence I remembered wasn't physical, it was emotional. This time, I wouldn't let them kill me with neglect. By the time I got home, night had fallen over our Westchester estate. The house was lit up warmly, laughter spilling from the living room as I opened the door. It stopped abruptly when they saw me. Sarah, our 32-year-old daughter, rose from the couch with a frown. "Mom, where have you been? We've been waiting all day. Aunt Sophia just arrived." Sophia sat in her wheelchair near the fireplace, looking fragile and beautiful despite the years. Her dark hair was perfectly styled, her eyes wide with practiced vulnerability. Alex, I'm so sorry to impose. I told John it wasn't right. Her voice was soft, trembling. Classic Sophia. Retreat to advance. John stood protectively beside her, his expression darkening as he looked at me. Alex, you knew today was the day. You could have helped prepare her room. I took in the scene, fresh jasmine flowers on the mantel, Sophia's favorite, never mine. New linens on the guest bed I could see through the open door. Details John never bothered with for our anniversaries. I walked past them to our bedroom, my bedroom now, and began packing a suitcase. My clothes were already scattered on the floor, as if someone had started the process for me. John followed, voice rising. What the hell are you doing? Leaving, I said simply, folding a sweater. You want Sophia here? Fine. But I'm not staying to play nurse. Sarah appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. Mom, you're being dramatic. She's disabled. We all have jobs. Someone has to care for her. You're home all day. I paused, looking at my daughter, the child I'd sacrificed everything for, in my last life. Her words had broken me. This time, they only hardened my resolve. I pulled the divorce papers from my briefcase. I'd had them drawn up months ago in the previous timeline, though I'd never used them. Now they were ready. I tossed them onto the bed. Sign these, John. You're free. Marry her if you want. Just do it without me. The room went silent. Sophia's hand flew to her mouth, eyes filling with tears. Sarah's face twisted in shock. John stared at the papers like they were written in another language. You're insane, he whispered. No, I said, zipping the suitcase. For the first time in years, I'm completely sane. I checked into the penthouse suite at the plaza, the kind of extravagance I'd always denied myself. Room service delivered lobster and champagne, while I soaked in a marble tub overlooking Central Park. For the first time in decades, I spent money on myself without guilt. The next morning, I slept until noon. When I finally stirred, the concierge informed me I had visitors. I wasn't surprised. Sarah stormed in first, John trailing behind, looking exhausted. Sophia wasn't with them, probably playing the innocent victim back home. Mom, this is ridiculous, Sarah started immediately. Running away to a hotel. At your age, people will talk. Let them, I said, stretching lazily on the sofa. I'd ordered breakfast eggs Benedict, fresh berries, artisanal pastries, everything I used to deny myself to save money for their dreams. Sarah's eyes widened at the spread. You ordered all this. You're really okay wasting money like this. I picked up a strawberry, biting into it slowly. The sweetness exploded on my tongue. It's not waste if it makes me happy. John tried reason. Alex, it's just caring for Sophia. It's not forever. You're making this into something it's not. I set down my coffee. Then choose. Divorce me or send her away. I'm done being the convenient solution to your guilt. He flinched. Sarah looked between us, panic rising. If you divorce, what am I supposed to tell people? This will destroy our family's reputation. I laughed, genuinely this time. Your reputation. Tell me, Sarah, exactly how much is that worth when I'm dead from exhaustion? The room went quiet. I stood, walking to the window. Below, Manhattan pulsed with life, people living for themselves, not as supporting characters in someone else's story. I spent my whole life worrying about appearances. I said quietly, your father's image as the perfect husband, your future as the perfect daughter. I diminished myself to make everyone else shine, no more. John's voice cracked. We've been married 35 years. You'd throw it all away. I'm not throwing anything away. You did that the moment you decided Sophia's comfort mattered more than mine. I pulled out another copy of the divorce agreement. I'd made 20. Sign it. You keep the house. I take my share of the investments. Fair. He stared at me, really seeing me for perhaps the first time in years. The uncertainty in his eyes was new, in my previous life. He'd always known I'd cave eventually. Sarah tried tears. Mom, please, think about me. I looked at her, beautiful, successful, and utterly blind to her own privilege. I have thought about you. For 32 years. Now it's time to think about me. They left defeated, but I knew this was only round one. Days passed in blissful solitude. I shopped on Fifth Avenue, bought clothes I actually liked instead of whatever was practical. I ate at restaurants I'd always wanted to try. I existed for myself. Then came the call from Sarah. Dad's sick. He can't work and care for Sophia alone. Please come home, just for a few days. I went, not out of obligation, but curiosity. How quickly would the mask slip? The house felt different, oppressive. Sophia had taken over the sunroom, medical equipment everywhere, jasmine overwhelming the air. John looked thinner, stressed. Sarah was frazzled from juggling her banking job and helping. But the real show started at dinner. Sophia accidentally knocked over her water glass, soaking the tablecloth, then complained about the food being too salty, food I hadn't even cooked. Sarah snapped at me for not helping more. John defended Sophia at every turn. I watched it all with clinical detachment until Sophia sighed dramatically. I never wanted to come between you two. I'll go back to the nursing home tomorrow. John immediately, no, you're staying. Alex will understand. That was when I stood up. Actually, I don't understand. I don't understand why I spent decades making myself small for people who never noticed I was disappearing. I looked at John. You want her here fine, but I'm gone. Permanently. As I walked out with my suitcase for the second time, Sarah grabbed my arm. Mom, wait, can you at least leave some money? We're struggling with Sophia's medical bills. I looked at her hand on my sleeve, then at her face, expectant, entitled. No, I said gently, you're adults. Figure it out. The door closed behind me with a soft click that felt louder than any slam. Freedom tasted like champagne and possibility. And for the first time in 2 lifetimes, I was choosing myself. I moved into a sleek 2-bedroom apartment on the Upper East Side, the kind of place I'd always admired from afar, but never allowed myself to have. Minimalist furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the park, a kitchen I actually enjoyed cooking in. For the first time, my home reflected me not the role of wife, mother, caretaker. I returned to part-time lecturing at Columbia Law. Not for the money, but for the structure, the intellectual spark. The reminder that I was once a sharp, respected attorney before I let marriage dull my edges. That's where I reconnected with Mia Reyes, the brilliant former student I'd quietly sponsored through law school after her parents died in a car crash. She was 28 now, a rising freelance photographer whose raw, emotional portraits had gone viral. She spotted me across the campus cafe and nearly tackled me with a hug. Professor Harper. Alex, you look incredible. I heard rumors, but I didn't believe them. Her eyes searched mine. Are you really divorced? I smiled faintly. Working on it. We exchanged numbers, and within days she was texting daily, inviting me for coffee, sending me links to exhibits. Her gratitude was genuine, but more importantly, her company was effortless. No guilt trips, no demands. Back at the old house, things unraveled faster than I expected. John quit his consulting gigs to care for Sophia full-time, claiming no one else could be trusted. Sarah, juggling her vice president position at a midtown investment bank, grew resentful. She called one evening, voice tight. Mom, Dad's exhausted. Sophia's needs are constant medications, physical therapy, special meals. We need help. I could hear Sophia in the background, softly complaining about pain. I drove over, telling myself it was only to observe. The house smelled of antiseptic and jasmine. John had lost weight. Shadows ringed his eyes. Sophia lay propped on the sofa, looking ethereal in white silk, but her gaze sharpened the moment I entered. Alex, thank you for coming. I know this is awkward. Sarah pulled me into the kitchen. Just stay a few days. Cook, keep her company. Dad and I are drowning. I looked at my daughter designer suit, exhausted face, and felt a flicker of pity quickly smothered by memory. You chose this. Sarah. You begged me to accept her. Her jaw tightened. She's dying. Mom, the doctors found a tumor. Inoperable. The words hit harder than I wanted. Sophia had cancer advanced, aggressive. In my previous life, she'd hidden it until after my death, using John's guilt and money to fight it privately. Now the secret was out early because they couldn't manage alone. That night at a charity gala for cancer research irony at its finest, I confronted John in a quiet corner of the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead. Women in gowns air-kissed. Men discussed deals. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, but diminished somehow. "Alex," he started, reaching for my arm. I stepped back. "Tell me the truth. John, how long have you known about the tumor?" His face crumpled. 6 months. She didn't want anyone to know. Said it would make her a burden. I laughed bitterly. And bringing her into our home wasn't a burden. Transferring millions from our joint accounts to her private care wasn't. He paled. "How did you—" "I'm a lawyer. Remember, I still have access to statements. Actually, I'd hired a forensic accountant the week I moved out. The first clue, irregular transfers labeled medical consulting. The second, security footage from the private clinic showing Sophia arriving alone, fully mobile. No wheelchair in sight for certain appointments." John's voice dropped. "She's terrified. Alex, the accident took her leg. Now this. I owe her." "You owe me 35 years, I said quietly. "But debts only matter when both sides acknowledge them." He looked suddenly old. "I was wrong. I see that now. Come home. We'll send her to the best facility money can buy. Just come back." For a moment, I wavered. I saw the man I'd fallen in love with ambitious, charming, once tender. But then I remembered the cold nights, the dismissed anniversaries, the way he'd let Sarah treat me like staff. "No," I said, "I'm finally home where I am." As I turned to leave, Sophia wheeled herself into view, tears glistening. "Don't punish him for my mistakes. Alex, I'll go. Tonight if you want." Classic maneuver. I almost smiled. Stay or go. Sophia, it's no longer my concern. The next day, the first press hit. A society blogger posted anonymous sources close to the family, claiming John Harper had abandoned his loyal wife for his disabled ex-lover. Shares in his remaining board seats dipped. Sarah texted furiously, "This is your fault." I didn't reply. Instead, I met Mia for drinks and told her everything. She listened without judgment, then said, "You're becoming the woman you were always meant to be. It's terrifying and beautiful." That night, alone in my apartment, I stared at the divorce papers still unsigned on my counter. For the first time, I wondered if vengeance was reshaping me into someone I wouldn't recognize. I poured a glass of wine and whispered to the dark, "Am I becoming the monster?" The divorce proceedings began in earnest. I filed in New York Supreme Court, requesting equitable distribution, alimony, and forensic accounting of all assets. John's attorneys top tier. Expensive tried to paint me as vindictive, menopausal, unstable. My lawyer, a shark named Vanessa Chen I'd mentored years ago, countered with bank records showing systematic depletion of marital funds for Sophia's care. Discovery was brutal. Depositions revealed John had quietly retitled the Hamptons house in Sophia's name for tax purposes. Offshore accounts held millions traced to his company bonuses, money that should have been half mine. The judge froze assets pending full audit. Public opinion shifted. The same society circles that once fawned over John now whispered about his duplicity. Page 6 ran a blind item, which Wall Street darling left his devoted wife to play knight for a manipulative ex. Sarah was quietly asked to resign from her bank's executive track conflict of interest. They said, I didn't celebrate. Each victory felt hollow, tinged with grief for the life I thought we'd had. Then came the mistake that almost broke me. Sarah called hysterical one night. "Mom, please come. It's Jake, he hit me." Jake was her on-again, off-again boyfriend, a charming hedge fund bro with a gambling problem. In my previous life, she'd married him after divorcing the decent man I'd chosen for her, and he'd ruined her. I rushed to her Soho loft. She sat on the floor, lip split, eye swelling. Jake was gone fled after she threatened police. She clung to me sobbing. I should have listened to you, about everything. Something in me cracked. I held her, cleaned the blood, called a doctor friend for discreet care. For 48 hours, I stayed cooking soup, icing bruises, listening to her regrets about Sophia, about treating me like a maid. On the third morning, John arrived with Sophia. They'd come to help. Sophia took one look at Sarah's injuries and said softly, "Poor darling. Men can be so cruel when they feel trapped." Then, to me, this is why families should stay together, for protection. Sarah's face hardened. She looked at her father. "You brought her here after everything." The fight erupted. Sarah accused Sophia of turning John against her, of bleeding them dry. Sophia cried delicately. John defended his dying friend. I watched the three of them tear at each other and realized this was the natural consequence of their choices. My presence only prolonged the illusion of rescue. I left without a word. Later, alone. I stared at my reflection. I'd almost slipped back into the savior role, almost forgiven, almost let them pull me into the wreckage again. The realization chilled me. Revenge wasn't just about destroying them, it was about not letting them destroy me twice. Vanessa called with the final blow. Hospital security footage from the night of Sophia's original accident, obtained through a sympathetic nurse, showed Sophia switching seats with John moments before impact. She'd known the airbag on her side was faulty. She'd chosen to risk her life to bind him forever with guilt. I sat with that truth for days. Sophia hadn't been an innocent victim, she'd engineered her own tragedy. When I confronted John privately in his attorney's office, he broke. She was desperate. Her first husband had left her penniless. She thought if I felt responsible. His voice trailed off. For the first time, he looked small, human, pitiable. I felt nothing. The settlement came swiftly after that. I received half the liquid assets, the apartment outright, substantial alimony. John kept the Westchester house mortgaged to the hilt for Sophia's experimental treatments abroad. Sarah moved into a studio, jobless and humbled. Sophia flew to Switzerland alone. John drove her to the airport. She died 3 months later. At the memorial, Sarah approached me in black, eyes red. "Mom, I was wrong about everything. Can we start over?" I looked at her, at the daughter I'd loved fiercely, and felt only exhaustion. "Not yet," I said. "Maybe not ever. But I hope you learn to choose better." I walked away into the crisp autumn air, leaves swirling around my ankles like applause. Revenge tasted like ash, but freedom tasted like the rest of my life. The divorce was finalized in a quiet courtroom on a rainy November morning. John signed without protest, his hand trembling slightly as the pen scratched across the paper. He kept the Westchester house, now heavily mortgaged to cover Sophia's final treatments abroad, and what remained of his reputation. I walked out with half the liquid assets, the Upper East Side apartment free and clear, and a monthly alimony stream that ensured I would never again have to choose between my comfort and someone else's expectations. The judge's gavel felt less like an ending and more like the starting gun of a race I was finally allowed to run. Sarah did not attend the hearing. She had moved into a small studio in Brooklyn after resigning from the bank, quietly encouraged to leave once the asset transfers became public. For weeks, she avoided me. But the bruises from Jake faded slower than her pride. One freezing December evening, she appeared at my door, coat dusted with snow, eyes swollen from crying. "Mom, I'm pregnant," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "And Jake's gone. He took the last of my savings and disappeared." I let her in, made tea, and listened as she poured out the story: the gambling debts, the escalating violence, the night he held her hostage until she transferred everything. She had kept it hidden, terrified of admitting she'd chosen so badly. Now she was alone, terrified, and begging for help. Something in me wanted to refuse, to let the consequences teach the lesson I never could. But I looked at her, really looked, and saw not just the entitled daughter who had sided with Sophia, but the frightened woman carrying a child into uncertainty. I called Vanessa Chen, who connected us to a top domestic violence attorney pro bono. Within days, we had a restraining order, police reports filed, and a medical exam documenting every injury. Jake was arrested in Atlantic City, trying to cash out at a casino. The evidence was ironclad. He took a plea for 18 months. I paid for Sarah's therapy, a safe maternity clinic, and a larger apartment in my building, 1 bedroom for her, 1 for the nursery. Not forgiveness, not yet, but justice. I told her plainly I'm helping because no woman should face this alone. Not because you've earned it. Prove you've changed." She nodded, tears falling silently. For the first time, she asked about my life, my lectures, my travels with Mia, the women's shelter fundraiser I was chairing. She listened without interrupting, without defensiveness. It was a beginning, fragile as spring ice. Meanwhile, the wider world began to notice. Mia and I had started posting our adventures weekends in the Hudson Valley, lectures on women's financial independence, candid talks about midlife reinvention. Her photographs were stunning me laughing on a ferry, me speaking to packed auditoriums, me simply alive. The account grew quickly. Brands reached out for sponsorships. Media requested interviews. We funneled every dollar beyond expenses into a Foundation Harper Reyes Fund for Women Escaping Abuse. Within a year, we had awarded dozens of scholarships and emergency grants. The press that once whispered about John's scandal now celebrated Alexandra Harper, the attorney who turned betrayal into empowerment. Invitations flooded in TED stages, podcasts, board seats. I accepted only those that aligned with the mission. John watched from afar. I knew because mutual friends mentioned his quiet questions, the way he lingered over articles about the foundation. Sophia died in a Zurich clinic 6 months after the divorce. John flew over alone, stayed for the cremation, and returned hollow. He sold the Westchester house at a loss, moved into a modest condo upstate, and took consulting work that barely covered bills. Sarah told me he spent evenings staring at old photos, drinking too much, muttering apologies to empty rooms. One night he called drunk, voice cracking. I was wrong about everything. Sophia, she admitted it all before the end. The seat switch, the manipulation, the money. I let her rewrite our history because facing the truth meant admitting I'd destroyed us for a lie. He paused, breathing ragged. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know I finally see you." I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I said only, "Thank you for telling me," and hung up. No absolution, no comfort. Some wounds are not ours to heal. Sarah gave birth to a daughter in April, healthy, fierce-eyed, named Lily after my mother. Holding her granddaughter for the first time cracked something open in me, but I kept boundaries firm. Sarah attended therapy weekly, volunteered at the foundation, and slowly earned small trusts, babysitting privileges, shared holidays, honest conversations. Forgiveness came in increments, measured in changed behavior rather than words. Karma, I learned, is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is quiet erosion, the slow realization of what was lost forever. 2 years after the divorce, the foundation hosted its first gala at the Met. Tables overflowed with donors. Mia's photographs lined the walls, each telling a survivor's story. I wore emerald silk, hair swept up, feeling every bit the woman I'd postponed becoming. On stage, I spoke without notes. I spent decades believing love required self-erasure. I was wrong. The greatest justice we can offer ourselves in the world is to refuse to disappear. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, in the crowd, I spotted him David Lang, a former Columbia colleague and widower, whose quiet kindness I'd always admired from a distance. He approached with champagne and a shy smile. "You were magnificent, Alex, and you look radiant." We talked until the staff began stacking chairs. He asked me to dinner the following week. I said yes without hesitation. Our relationship unfolded slowly, museum evenings, long walks in the park, weekends in his Hudson River cottage. He never pushed, never demanded I shrink to fit his life. When I traveled for speaking engagements, he sent thoughtful texts and met me at the airport with flowers. For the first time, love felt like expansion rather than sacrifice. Sarah continued to grow. She earned a master's in social work on scholarship, joined the foundation full-time, and became its most persuasive advocate. Lily called me Nana Alex and reached for me with sticky toddler hands. At family gatherings now held in my apartment, or David's cottage, John was occasionally invited. He came quietly, sat on the edges, eyes often glistening. He never asked for more than he was offered a slice of pie, a few minutes with his granddaughter, the chance to say I'm proud of you both to Sarah and me in separate, private moments. One crisp October afternoon, David and I hiked Bear Mountain. At the summit, he took my hand. I'm not asking for promises. Alex, I'm just grateful for every day you choose to share with me. I kissed him then, wind whipping around us, city shimmering far below. Happiness, I realized, was not the absence of pain, but the presence of choice. Mia married a gentle documentary filmmaker. I walked her down the aisle since no parents remained. Sarah stood beside me as maid of honor. John watched from the back row, tears tracking silently down his cheeks. Years accumulated like quiet victories. The foundation expanded nationwide. I published a memoir that spent months on bestseller lists, not for revenge, but to give voice to countless women who wrote to say, "Your story saved me from staying." David and I bought a small house in Provence for summers. Lily learned French curses from the neighbors and perfect table manners from David. John's health declined slowly, heart issues. The irony not lost on anyone. In his final months, he moved into assisted living near Sarah. She visited daily, reading to him, bringing Lily. One evening she called me. "He wants to see you, just once." I went. He was frail in the hospital bed, monitors beeping softly. "Alex," he whispered, gripping my hand with surprising strength. "I spent my life chasing guilt and calling it love. You were the best thing I ever had, and I threw it away." His eyes searched mine. "I'm sorry. For all of it." I nodded. "I know." No more words were needed. He died peacefully 2 weeks later. At the funeral, I stood beside Sarah and Lily, David's arms steady around my shoulders. I felt sorrow for the young couple we'd once been, for dreams that never matured, but not regret. Life continued bright and full. I spoke at commencements, mentored young attorneys, gardened in Provence, laughed with David over bad French wine. Lily grew tall and fierce, inheriting her mother's newfound strength and my stubborn refusal to diminish herself for anyone. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I think of that rainy courtroom morning when I chose myself. The price was high lost years, fractured family, scars that never fully fade, but the reward is this, a life lived wide open, on my own terms. Karma delivered its final verdict gently. Those who betrayed me carry regret until their last breath. I carry forward into sunlight, heart scarred but beating strong, finally, completely, unapologetically free.